Reconstruction Index and the first in the world ETF that is focused on Ukrainian reconstruction efforts. Today, we're going to talk about the methodology, how it's called, where it's traded, maybe about some plans. I'll ask some questions, and you will have the opportunity to ask questions as well. And we have today representatives of two companies. Jane, please introduce yourself and then pass the mic to the router, Tom.
Yeah, so my name is Jane Edmondson. I'm the head of index product strategy for TMX VettaFi, and we're the index provider behind the index. Or behind the UCITS ETF.
Hi, I'm Tom Bailey. I'm head of research at HANetf. And so at HANetf, we're an ETF issuer, a European ETF issuer. So we're based in London, but we have offices and teams across Europe. So we create and distribute ETFs, exchange traded funds. We typically list them on the London Stock Exchange, on Borsa Italiana in Italy, on the Xetra exchange in Frankfurt. And increasingly, we're listing stuff on GPW, the Warsaw exchange. So we have two products listed in Warsaw already. We have our gold ETC as well as our defense ETF. So we're seeing growth of listing of our ETFs in other markets in Europe. So we have about 60 ETFs, and this was one of our most recent launches was this Ukraine Reconstruction ETF. And we use Jane's company, VettaFi, as the index provider to kind of define the methodology and capture the companies that we include in that ETF.
Perfect. Thank you.
What they're referring to, but
Hi, Relte here. With Jane and Tom, we built the index collaboratively, and yeah, I look after I look after index and passive product here at HAN. I'm mostly going to be in a spectator capacity today, seeing as we've got Jane and Tom online.
Great. And my first question, I guess, goes to Relte and Tom. About the why now, because in 2022 and 23 there were a few big conferences about Ukraine reconstruction efforts, and that basically went nowhere because the war, unfortunately, is still going on. When you announced this thing, I got a couple of questions. Does HANetf know something like the war is gonna end soon? Explain why you're doing this now when the reconstruction, unfortunately, is not starting next month.
Yeah. So we hold no special information about the outcome of the war. We decided last year that this is something we should take a look at creating it for. One of the kind of several people, the investors asking about it. You saw kind of articles in the FT in 2024 talking about the Ukraine reconstruction as an investment theme. So we kind of started thinking about it internally, and there's several kind of milestones, I guess, on the way of deciding, yeah, this is a product we have to create. One was we did an event on some of our other ETFs where we invited a speaker from the Ukrainian embassy in London, and he gave a presentation on the kind of growth of Ukrainian defense tech companies. The audience found it, and us included, we organized that event. And so that was a kind of another area of thinking about, okay, there's something potentially interesting here in terms of one, the broad reconstruction theme, which will obviously entail involvement of European companies. And then second is, something interesting is potentially going to emerge in Ukraine in terms of the sort of companies we're seeing, which might increasingly come to public markets and therefore become investable. So that's kind of what prompted our thinking around this. And then when we look at the numbers, we're a thematic ETF issuer. So when what we have to try and do often is think, what are the big new themes emerging in the global economy? What are these big investment themes that investors may want this sort of ETF style thematic exposure to? And so we concluded that the reconstruction of Ukraine is one. We go into some of the numbers a bit later just to give you that outline. And then when we looked into it too, it became apparent that actually there is elements of this are already happening. Some of the constituents in the index are already involved in, say, modernizing Ukraine's electricity grid, etc. And also we started to see some of these very innovative Ukrainian companies come to public markets. Swarmer, for example, listed on NASDAQ relatively recently, I believe 2 weeks ago. So, we feel that the timing, you never get the timing perfect with these thematic investment approaches. But we felt that, this was a product that investors want. And then, ultimately, you want to make sure that there's an investment vehicle for investors when that inflection point happens as well. Because if you produce it afterwards, then people will have missed the kind of opportune time to invest in it. So we want to try and make sure we're always ahead of the curve, and we launch a thematic ETF as well.
Yeah, thank you. And I would like to switch more to the Jane, and maybe Relte will add about the methodology. Obviously, you have this index, and I checked that most of the index now are industrial companies, which I guess logically makes sense. But maybe you can walk our viewers about the index methodology, how you actually select the companies, and you have a special note for Ukrainian-based companies like Swarmer, for example, or potentially Kyivstar. And also, you do say in a side that it's tilted towards Europe, so maybe you can comment that as well. Please explain the whole methodology to us.
Yeah, I'm happy to talk about the index construction. Obviously we had to be a little bit forward thinking because the reconstruction is just getting underway. So the approach that we're taking is to identify companies in critical market segments and geographies that are expected to play a material role in the rebuilding of Ukraine's infrastructure and security. So to qualify for inclusion, a constituent must be either a Ukrainian security, which is defined by domicile or headquarters. And we are now starting to see some companies, I think Tom just mentioned Swarmer. There's also some other companies that are coming to market, like Kyivstar, and then also Fairexpo as well. So we are going to try to get those companies in as quickly as we can. We have a fast track IPO provision to capture those Ukrainian IPOs. And then non-Ukrainian companies that are eligible if they belong to business segments which are expected to benefit from the reconstruction of Ukraine. And so those market segments include things like building and construction, infrastructure, defense and engineering, and the energy transition. And all of these segments have been identified in the rapid damage assessment reports that are released by the government of Ukraine, the European Commission, and the UN. So we have an active sort of guide path and manual that helps us model where the damages and losses are and where the recovery and reconstruction needs to be. So those are kind of the rules that guide the methodology, along with the, you mentioned that we do have a kind of a European tilt, because we do think that global equities that are headquartered in Europe are going to be the biggest beneficiaries of this trend. We do allow some worldwide industrial companies as well, but this really is sort of a European focused portfolio with companies headquartered in Europe. And then also there can be defense companies headquartered in Europe as well, along with some U.S. names that would be beneficiaries of contracts. So that pretty much sums up the index methodology.
Yeah, thank you, Jane. Relte, would you like to add anything on that? How you took that index methodology and packed it into the ETF?
Sure, I'll just add that there are specific allocations for private equity in terms of investment trusts listed on exchanges that are liquid and meet the eligibility requirements. So should some fund manager be successful in listing a portfolio of private equity Ukrainian companies, they would also be directly included in the index up to 5%. So a small allocation, but also another tier of direct Ukrainian exposure. And then lastly, we do have a negative screen where we screen our companies that maintain operations in Russia. So we directly reference the Leave.Russia campaign by the Kiev School of Economics. The website is a way to also proactively align interests of the companies within the index and the fund.
Well, since I think somebody has like the noises, so please mute your mics when you're not talking. Okay, I guess we kind of understand now how you select the companies. For all our viewers, of course, we providing the links to VettaFi website and HANetf websites where you can find details. But let me address the elephant in the room probably, and I would like to hear all of you opinions on that, about not having any Ukrainian company in the ETF right now. For me, the biggest name is obviously Kyivstar. I think it's about 2-3 billion market cap, traded on NASDAQ. Pretty much every Ukrainian knows that name like a household name in the country. Definitely is going to participate in infrastructure. It is critical infrastructure now. So if you can address Kyivstar and all the other companies, of course, too. Swarmer was like IPO, everybody wrote about because it just went to the moon. Yeah, please address, why it's not included and when you expect, what conditions should be met to have at least Kyivstar in that product. I will start with Jane, but I would like
so Kyivstar, Swarmer, and Fair Expo, those are the three companies that we expect to be added with the next reconstitution, just based on the fact that they're liquid enough and have adequate market cap size to be included in the portfolio. And as I mentioned, we have this fast tracking of IPOs. So as new names come to market, we're trying to get those in as quickly as possible. And obviously the intent is to have as much direct exposure to Ukraine as we can. So there is a precedence for that.
Sure, I'd just say, what we've done with the ETF is it's not a Ukrainian equity ETF. We want Ukrainian equity in there, but it's a Ukraine reconstruction. So we have kind of various different pillars of the exposure as we describe it. One pillar simply being these European and to some degree global infrastructure industrial stocks, which we deem to be participants in the reconstruction, and that's one pillar. Second pillar are Ukrainian public companies, and then the third pillar is what Relte mentioned in terms of some of these unlisted companies, which we could get exposure to via an unlisted vehicle when one lists, which is able to buy unlisted companies. So on that last one, that's nothing we can do there until someone does list this closed-end investment trust. It won't be us. We do ETFs, not closed-end trusts. On the middle one, which obviously is what you're asking about, is Ukrainian equities themselves. So I mean, the context here being that historically the Ukrainian stock market has been relatively small and illiquid. I believe the last stats I could find were it represents about market cap was around 3% of GDP, and that stat was from 2018, and there's no statistical update from the World Bank since. So it's not, I'm sure obviously your listeners being Ukrainians themselves will know that it's not a country which has had particularly prominent equity markets. But we expect this to change. We look at some legislation coming out of Ukraine for reforms towards capital markets. So we do expect it to change, and we want to be able to capture that. But as well, at the same time, you have companies like Kyivstar and Swarmer, which have decided to list internationally, which is obviously what many European companies all across Europe do. Many Swedish companies go and list on NASDAQ as well, particularly if they're tech focused. Why not? You get better multiples. So we want to capture those as well. So, but what we've done is we've written rules in a certain way. So I believe for a non-Ukrainian company, they must have a minimum market cap of 100 million. Relte and Jane will know these numbers better than me. For a Ukrainian company, it's a minimum market cap of 50 million. So that allows them to kind of, that lowers the hurdle rate for them coming in. With Kickstarter and Swarmer, we obviously can't say for certain, but we expect with the next rebalance, there's a strong chance that those would be added to the index. So, as it sits now, it has, as you mentioned, 0 Ukrainian companies, but we expect this to change very quickly. And then also we expect this to continue to change in the future as Ukrainian companies either decide to list on public markets outside of Ukraine, such as NASDAQ, or maybe a German exchange, who knows? And then at the same time, as we see potentially more Ukrainian companies decide to look for their own domestic exchange as well. And what we hope with this ETF is that, it becomes a buyer of Ukrainian companies. So when Ukrainian companies are considering how they raise capital, should they go to public markets? Is that a desirable way to raise capital? That they know that there is this ETF out there, which is going to be, as long as the requirements are met, a buyer of the equities.
Yeah, I think Tom's covered everything there perfectly, so not much to add.
Yeah, I think hopefully we will see those companies because when I told my friends about the ETF, that was the first question actually. That was the first question when we met with Relte as well. So Relte, I have a more interesting question for you about this third, more of the private part of the fund. I see a lot of interest and demand for Ukrainian drone manufacturers. Swarmer is on software side, but there are very strong hardware manufacturers in Ukraine of drone technologies. What would be like the structure? Obviously, we might not name the exact companies, but what would be the structure for this fund to invest in those drone manufacturers? How it's going to happen, you see?
So in London, it's quite common for there to be this fund structure, which we call investment trusts. And essentially, they're closed-ended. So if you take an ETF, it's open-ended, which means obviously, or a mutual fund and an ETF, they're both open-ended, which means when the shares or the units of the fund are sold, the manager essentially has to sell the underlying assets, which means you can't hold illiquid assets in a mutual fund or an ETF for the most part. It's changing in the US, but as a general rule, historically, ETFs haven't been able to hold illiquid, unlisted companies. But investment trusts are closed-ended. So what that means is they list on a stock exchange with a fixed pool of capital. Essentially, they IPO their shares as an investment trust. Say they raise 100 million. They can go out with that 100 million and they go and buy whatever companies they want or any assets they want. And their shares are listed on the stock exchange like an ETF, but there's only a secondary market. So those shares are only trading between other people on the exchange. With an ETF, if someone comes and buys a big bunch of shares, then we have to go out and buy the requisite amount of assets to make the fund whole again. With a investment trust, that's not the case. So what you get with investment trusts, and so it's a bit technical, is you get essentially a divergence between the value of the assets and the share price, because the shares are just being traded on the exchange. So that has its downsides, but one of its big benefits is it means that this fund can hold any kind of asset which is illiquid, well, not any asset under whatever is allowed under regulations or the mandate, but they can hold illiquid assets because they're not subject to inflows and outflows of the fund based on buying and selling. So they're a great vehicle for holding illiquid assets. And what we kind of see in the London market is that these sort of investment trust structures are used to, say, buy US pre-IPO tech companies, right, as a way for investors to get access to private markets. Or they'll buy, say, property. Real estate investment trusts are very popular. This is the same structure, essentially. Or renewable energy sites, for example, which can't just be bought and sold how you wish. And so we kind of, from our conversations with people in the City of London, kind of expect that they because of the interest in some of these unlisted Ukrainian companies, we might end up getting, we wouldn't do it, but we might end up seeing investment trusts list on the stock exchange, which are able then to buy a portion of shares in these unlisted companies. And then because the shares of that closed-end investment trust structure are listed on the London Stock Exchange, the shares themselves are liquid, and then we go able to buy that within the ETF in theory.
Well, I understood, but not sure if our viewers know that. But dear viewers, please ask questions if you have any now. That's a unique opportunity. But of course, we will have recording, and you can replay and watch. So yeah, we sorted out all these three pillars of the companies included. I would like to talk more about ETF now. I see 3 million already invested. And Tom, please give us your expectations, like how big this product can become now. Is it 100 million, 50 million? What would be the success? And maybe a little bit of a story of the launch. I've seen one video, actually it's on your website, about the launch. What was interesting about these first days of ETF?
Sure. So we don't. So we listed this with a 1 million in seed AUM 3 weeks ago now, I believe, and it'll be 2 weeks, and then we've seen another roughly 2 million come in. So we sit at 3 million AUM. So obviously, you could say it's triple in assets, but obviously it's still a relatively low number. We don't list an ETF unless we kind of have faith in its ability to gather at least 100 million in AUM. But we would expect this to go further. I mean, if you look at some of our previous products we've launched, particularly where we've been early, we've seen some great success. So alongside VettaFi, the index provider for our NATO defense ETF, that sits at 3.1 billion in AUM. So that's kind of what we're looking to achieve. We want this to be, obviously, goes without saying, we want this to be a large fund. But obviously we have optimism and faith in investors across Europe, kind of realizing the importance of this theme and coming in to buy it. And we started to see, obviously, some of these creates, some of these inflows, but it's still early days. In terms of the story behind the launch, yeah, so when you list an ETF on London Stock Exchange, sometimes you get the opportunity to host an event for a market ceremony at London Stock Exchange. It's called a market open or a market closed, depends if you do the open or close. It's kind of like if your listeners would have seen, say, at the NASDAQ, where someone rings a bell to open the market. It's kind of like that, but there is no bell. Instead, it's put in a block in a box. I don't know why. That's what LSE to explain. But essentially, it's a ceremony to kind of mark the importance when a LSE deems that a new ETF that is particularly notable when differentiated comes to market. So they're not going to do it if you just launch another version of the S&P 100 or something like that. But with this one, they decided to do it, and they were trying to support some of it. So we worked with them and some of the people, I know the Ukrainian embassy in London, to kind of make a good show of this event. So at this event, we had the CEO of London Stock Exchange give a short speech. We had someone from the UK's Foreign Office give a short speech, and then most excitingly, we had His Excellency General Valery Zaluzhny give a short speech as well, thanks to the embassy here. He's the ambassador for Ukraine to London, to the UK rather. So we had him come and give a short speech as well. So it's kind of very exciting, and seeing these very important figures. The most important, obviously, being the ambassador himself, kind of talk about the importance of companies like HANetf, kind of thinking about what they can do and the future of Ukraine.
Yeah, I would like to add too that there's a lot of investment that's going to be backing this theme. I think the latest damage assessment was over 500 billion euro that's going to be needed to rebuild Ukraine. So there's going to be a lot of companies that benefit from this, a lot of different market segments. So I think that's something that goes into the idea of building an investment product. Whenever we recognize that there's going to be a long-term theme that's going to play out over many years, and certainly the reconstruction of Ukraine is going to be one of those situations.
Yeah, agree. And I see a lot of German companies in the index, which seems logical too, as they're going to be active in this reconstruction efforts. I also wanted to ask Tom about the listings, because there are many Ukrainians in Poland, I just came back from a huge conference in Krakow, and the local stock market obviously is going up as Polish economy. You listed, I believe, 2 ETFs on Warsaw Stock Exchange. So is Ukrainian ETF coming there soon? What are the plans?
Yeah, I can't give kind of concrete timeline, but it's definitely something that we want to do, and we're considering listing this product in Poland on the Warsaw Exchange, and because we think it makes sense. This is a theme that I think will resonate with investors there, both Poles and Ukrainians who are in Poland. But right now, it's only listed in London, Frankfurt, and Milan on the Borsa Italiana. But that's kind of typically when you list an ETF, these are the first 3 markets you list in, and then you add other markets. So if you look at the journey of a lot of our ETFs, those were the first 3 markets we listed in, and then we go and list potentially elsewhere. So we've listed on exchanges in Switzerland, in the Nordics, Finland and Sweden as well. So it's definitely something we think is important.
Yeah, for all our viewers, I'd like to remind about likes, since we are on YouTube, and the commission of the ETF is 65 basis points, and all the usual ETF documents are listed on HANetf website, which we provide in the links in the description to this video. Relte, Jane, Tom, is there anything else important to know specifically for Ukrainian audience, potential investors of this ETF? Anything else you would like to add?
Just to kind of reiterate the point that this is it's an early kind of launch for a product. We think this is a theme that is kind of just getting started, as your listeners will know, and we'd encourage everyone to kind of keep an eye on the holdings every quarter in the year, so every 4 months. It's rebalanced, which means the kind of new companies into the index. So keep an eye out for the other companies which are being added. You'll be able to see the holdings on the website, and you can see how kind of this investment theme evolves.
Yeah, I would add that as well. The Ukrainian companies will also rank above the other companies. So we take a top 50. So even if the Ukrainian companies are small, if there are enough of them that meet the eligibility requirements, they will push out the larger European and US companies over time. So we could have a majority of Ukrainian companies should the capital markets open up freely and people come to market. So it is one, as Tom mentioned, to watch closely as companies become healthier that are already public, and then companies come to market and go public. So yeah, I'd sign up to our newsletters and etc. and watch the website for the holdings.
And I would just add that there is a lot of capital that's going to be going behind this theme, and a lot of it's going to be coming from Europe. So this really is kind of a European story, especially as the US becomes distracted with other engagements around the world.
Yeah, Jane, Relte, Tom, thank you. I believe it was the nice and brief introduction to this ETF. As Ukrainian, I wish it success, and I'm glad, the first type of this product launch. Obviously, when you will get 100 million or more, there will be some positive development, which we all expect for Ukraine as the country. Thank you for your time today, dear viewers. One more reminder about likes. Please write the comments in the comment section. We provide all the links to the both websites, and also let us know in the comments if you're going to invest into this product, if you're considering this for your thematic portfolio. If yes, what attracted you? If no, why? What are the reasons you are not investing into that one? Thank you again.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for having us.